As we open up 2020, our 8th season and 8 years of podcasting here at the Big Buck Registry, we thought it only appropriate to take one last look at 2019. If you're a frequent listener of this show, you know that in each episode, we segment off into the deer news at the beginning and a good deer hunting story at the end. In the last show of 2019, we put together all the best deer stories told by our guest of 2019, and likewise, we thought we'd take a look back at all the best deer news stories of 2019 as well, like a time capsule of events. We visit with Jim Keller, our news anchor, and with some frequent news story contributors like Tim Donzie, John Geis, and Dan Applebaum. And then, through some consolidation of all the news stories we featured on the show in 2019, we present a Deer News Year in Review with all the best deer news stories featured on the podcast in 2019. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from -33 Merino Wool Layering System, keeping you warm on the coldest days while staying breathable and wicking away moisture on the wet ones. Rackology, everything you need in one bag. Now available at Rural King and Orslin Farm and Home storefronts or online at www.rackology.org. Grizzly Ears, the most advanced engineered wireless earbuds for the outdoors. Covert scouting cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security, and Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. And show support for this podcast by visiting bigbuckmerch.com. That's bigbuckmerch.com. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hi, this is Dan Infold from HuntTheBeast.com. You're about to listen to one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, this is Hal Blood from Big Woods Bucks. You're about to push play on my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hey, this is Zach Sandow at Onyx Hunt, and you're listening to one of my personal favorite podcasts, the Big Buck Registry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, "Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry." It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we're out of harnesses. We need your help. Anybody that has spare harnesses, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. We'll get to the entire roundtable discussion with the Deer News gang, followed by the 2019 Deer News in Review Time Capsule Edition in just one moment. But before we do, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my -33 Merino Wool base layer experience. My experience started with a visit to the -33 headquarters in Ashland, New Hampshire, for a tour of the warehouse and factory, followed by an interview with John Glidden, the owner and CEO. John is a straight-shooting New Hampshire Yankee, if ever there was one, and that straight-shooting attitude reflects in his product. It's high-quality stuff that does exactly what the company says it will do. After a steady hike on a cold November day up the backside of a steep New Hampshire ridge, with the sun setting and the temps dropping, I wasn't soaked with sweat. Because of the -33 Merino Wool base layer, I was comfortably warm and dry and itch-free. Any perspiration was wicked away from my body, and my human scent was neutralized from the natural properties that the wool brings to the table. I was thankful that I was wearing that exact base layer when that dominant buck appeared. Rest assured, I'll be wearing my minus 33 merino wool base layer next year when the temperatures start to drop. I'd encourage you to check out minus 33 for yourself. Visit www.minus33.com. That's MINUS 33.com, and grab some base layers for the rest of this season or next. And please let them know you heard about them on this show by using the discount code BIGBUCK33 to get 10% off your next order. Without further ado, here's the roundtable conversation with Jim Keller, John Geiss, Tim Donzie, and Dan Applebaum, followed by the 2019 Time Capsule 2019 Deer News in Review. This is a special show we're putting out, and it's really just a recap of 2019 and the deer news that Jim Keller puts together. And just a little backstory, Jim started following the Big Buck Registry a long time ago, and we decided we needed a deer news anchor, and Jim stepped up to the plate. And I don't think we realize it, but there's a lot of work that goes into just trying to cover what's relevant today, and what's news, what's actual news happening right now. And what we've discovered over the years, and Jim, you can talk to this a little bit, that it takes almost a team. And fortunately, we on every single show, we always give credit to where some of the stories came from. And you'll frequently hear the name Dan Applebaum, John Geiss, Tim Donzie. And these are guys that have come forward and agreed to help kind of collectively find stories that are out there so we can bring them to the Big Buck Registry podcast when we air a show, and so everybody can hear what's going on. So we thought we'd do a little backstory and introduce you to everybody that's involved in this project, the Deer News Project. Jim, you want to start and kind of tell us how you got involved with the Deer News Project? And I know we've talked about it a bunch of times, but I think it's good for everybody to hear.
Yeah, Jay, it was kind of just as you said. I had been listening to the podcast from the very beginning, and I got to know you and Dusty at least electronically or virtually through email, texting, a few phone calls. And I think it was right around the first of the year, 3 or 4 years ago, probably at this point, that we did the first Deer News. I remember it was a horrible recording as far as I wasn't real smooth at it, but the editing that you did was miraculous. Right. And it actually didn't sound too bad, but it's just progressed over the years, and it does each week. You're trying to find something original, try not to do the same stories, try to follow up on past stories. And then just as more and more people start listening to the podcast, some of the guys we have here start sending in stories, and it's just gotten to the point where each week, rather than having to research stories, I just pick from the ones that these guys have sent me. So they're all real good stories. Sometimes it's hard to pick just 3 to 5 that we're going to do that week. But it's been a real help. So it's just kind of evolved, and I think we've kind of got it down to a science.
Very cool. Dan, let's start with you. How did you get involved with the Deer News Project? What's your backstory? How'd you get involved in hunting, and how'd you get involved with the Deer News?
I was a outdoorsman as far as I was a sailor and Eagle Scout kind of stuff and camping. But my son took a free MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation, deer hunting course one summer to get his hunter certificate. And came home and wanted to go deer hunting. And I was kind of like, well, you kind of got the wrong dad, because I don't own a gun. I don't know how to deer hunt. And a little time passed, and I was mentioning it at work, and a coworker said, well, come on down. We'll take you out. We'll get you out in the tree stand. So we went down there, and we went and bought a gun and went down to his place. We had none of the gear, and we got out in the tree and went on that first hunt and just absolutely fell in love with it. And I have 5 children. All but my oldest daughter's gone hunting with us, lots of nieces and nephews. And I ended up buying acreage in southern Missouri and gotten into habitat restoration and just enjoy the heck out of it. And I started listening to it and really enjoyed it. So I was happy to contribute whenever I could with news stories.
Well, very nice. I appreciate you coming on board and helping out. There's so much to cover, and every little bit helps. And definitely have found that over the years that when I started this, I was going to need a team, and I didn't expect that there would be contributors in quite the way that there is. But you guys have been dealing stories to Jim for quite a while now, so I thought it was a good time to open this up to expose the world to how we put it all together. John, let's turn to you. John Geis, you've been contributing to the Deer News, and tell us your backstory. How did you get involved in hunting, and how did you get involved with the Jim Keller Deer News?
Well, I was raised in rural Louisiana, and unlike many, my father was not a hunter, but I was blessed to have an uncle that was, and he took me under his wing. And during very liberal seasons we have down here, we started off with archery in October, and some areas go to the last day of January with liberal game. You can kill several deer. And so through that uncle, he got me into it, got me hooked. And when I got out of college and was able to work with a firm of men that shared the same interest, and we hunted together, and which led to me getting my two daughters into hunting. It's kind of interesting to me that my oldest daughter, and all the hunting and the game cleaning that we've done over the years, it got her into an interest for medical school. So it's a family affair for us. We grow deer, we feed protein, we plant summer plots. I've not taken a deer in 2 years, but I've taken many father and sons and uncles and nephews and daughters. And to me, that's the thrill, seeing others get into the sport. And
very cool.
Being interested in it, I ran across the podcast and started to look at deer news articles myself, and I realized how hard it was. And so, especially during the off season when nothing's going on. And so that led me to send in a few articles, and Jim thanked me, and I appreciated it, and that's how I got involved.
Very cool. I appreciate your contribution to the show, and I'm sure all of our listeners appreciate it. Of course, it's behind the scenes, but this is why I wanted to highlight this news segment in the way I am today, because there's a lot more behind the scenes stuff that goes into collectively finding these stories and bringing them to the show. Tim, how about you? What's your backstory? How'd you get involved in hunting, and how did you get involved with the Deer News?
Thanks, Jay. As a young person, I was fortunate enough living here in the St. Louis, Missouri area to have a family that had a couple of lots at a lake in southeast Missouri, Clearwater Lake. Did a lot of boating and camping and fishing and hiking, and in time that turned into hunting. My dad was a small game hunter. My brother-in-law was a little bit more active with deer and turkey. They were both very instrumental in me getting into the woods. And over time, I got into bow hunting as a young adult. I had a school buddy that had a 2,000-acre ranch in central Missouri that I got to go face some big old deer on, and just got me hooked. I currently have 30, 35 acres in northeast Missouri I go to deer and turkey hunt. That included, similar to the others, family activities. My nephew, my brother-in-law, good friends, coworkers joined me there. In my travel and for work, I travel a lot. So I'm driving. I was looking for podcasts. At one time, I realized there was such a thing as podcasts about deer hunting, and I've been hooked on Big Buck Registry ever since. I always found the Deer News interesting, and I'm always watching, the Missouri Department of Conservation emails and other topics in the news about deer hunting, deer management, and just enjoy being involved.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you coming on board, and it's we're trying to give credit where credit is due, and Jim's always good about doing that in every show. So I thought it was time to get everybody together in one collective spot and have a discussion and kind of recap the year. And this is really what this show is. It's a recap of all the Deer News stories that happen throughout the year, and we're going to have this in a collective, in one show, taking all the Deer News stories. And after we end our conversation here, we're going to pick up where we started off in last January and bringing all those stories back to life, so we can essentially have a time capsule and have it all in one spot. So, Jim, let's turn back to you. You were discussing some of the statistics of the Deer News stories that came up throughout the year. You want to run those by us?
Yeah, so as we were talking about doing this, I thought I'd look back and given that for the whole year, these three guys have been involved, kind of do some analysis on the number of stories, types of stories, et cetera. So for 2019, we did 26 episodes with 86 stories. And as I kind of looked at the types of stories, we had about 15 that had to do with some kind of bad behavior, whether it was poaching, breaking a law, something to that effect. We had 17 that had to do with safety issues, accidents. And a big topic this year seemed to be different kinds of animal attacks, whether it was deer, bear, coyotes. A lot of stories about animal attacks this year. We had 14 that had to do with milestones or records, really young hunters, really old hunters. We had 31 stories that had to do with something kind of scientific, whether it was research, new hunting policies or seasons, changes in practices, data, public relations, around like maybe gun control type issues, and also animal behavior studies. And then the last category I tracked was just probably kind of more disease-related things. So there's 9 stories that had to do with CWD, bovine tuberculosis. Triple E was a story that was big in Michigan this year, and then just a couple on Lyme disease or ticks. So that totals our 86 stories for the year.
Gotcha. All right, very good. Dan, let's turn back to you. What was the most intriguing story to you in 2019 that you may have covered?
I guess I'll start with maybe a little selfish story in that the fact that poaching has always been a major struggle for me, and I've felt that Missouri, in particular, had very low poaching fines, and I've sent things to different senators and representatives and communicated some of the QDMA studies about poaching fines in each state, pointing out that Missouri was one of the lowest. And so the highlight of my year was when Missouri came out with an increase in poaching fines. And I think that it just goes to help those that might be tempted to poach. It decreases the risk. And I know in that part of the state I hunt in, that spread like wildfire amongst the people who might be inclined to poach. And I think it's making an impact already, improving both the quality of deer available for those legal hunters and also improving the reputation of hunters as a whole. So that was a highlight for me.
John, let's turn to you. What was your number one story of 2019?
Well, I think the number one topic that struck me, since I'm so interested in growing the deer herd, was the proliferation of the wasting disease, the chronic wasting disease. Mississippi got hit with it, or the case was discovered there late last year. It has changed the way everyone does business as far as even transporting harvested deer to, alerting the agencies. And I think that's a primary concern for me. And the stories that Jim identified on that were top notch. And I think everybody likes those feel good stories too. As we get older, we start thinking about the time when we may not be able to hunt. And then we hear about someone that's 100 years old or 90 years old that was able to get out and enjoy the outdoors, and it kind of gives you a sense of hope. So those are the two categories that I really took interest in this year.
Nice, very good. All right, Tim, what's your number one story of the year?
Well, I'm also going to make it a personal story. My situation here in the St. Louis area is, in the last couple of years, I've been able to move to a more rural part of the county of St. Louis County, and we have deer all over the place. It's great. Get to see them in my yard. I get to hunt in my backyard. I have 3 acres here, so we're allowed to archery hunt. I've harvested my first deer, but the real story, in my opinion, is that our municipality called Wildwood is starting up a deer management committee, and they've started doing some research on the population of the deer, which they are overpopulated. I can identify that easily. Most people can. There's lots of car accidents. But I was disturbed by a survey they put out. And within the survey of asking the citizens what their feelings are about the deer population, they were inserting information like, did you know kind of facts? And they were all very anti-deer. And I found that disturbing. Came down to the point of asking people their feelings about having sharpshooters come in and manage the deer herd, with no comments about archery hunting, no comments about good positive things that come from the deer herd here in Wildwood. So I've begun getting involved. I've reached out to our ward representatives and some of the people on the deer committee. I'm going to start going to meetings and offer my services to, if needed, if they'll allow me, to help connect landowners here in Wildwood with people, responsible archers, to come in and help manage the deer herd rather than jumping right to an expensive proposition of hiring sharpshooters to come in and manage the deer herd.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. All right, Mr. Keller, you get to read these stories each and every week. I get to edit them. What's your number one story of 2019?
I think the stories that I tend to gravitate towards just have to do with the preservation of the sport. So whether it's around gun control issues, the tradition, laws that are going into effect that might help more people get involved in hunting, stories like we talked about where I think there was a much older lady who hunted for the first time with her son and got a deer. So it's kind of the feel-good stuff. But I think the story about the elderly lady who got her first deer, I think that was my favorite of the year.
Gotcha. I think that was probably one of my favorites as well. And I'll just throw in my 2 cents here. I mean, I think all the stories are intriguing. I'm going to kind of speak on a global or a higher up view of this, I guess, instead of an individual story, is that the stories that come out about the poachers or those kids that were abusing the deer that was wounded, those are the ones that drive me nuts, because as hunters, the people that are not doing it correctly, that are doing it immorally, illegally, those people unfortunately look a lot like us, the people that are doing it correctly. And it's hard for that middle ground, that 80% that we need to sway when it comes to votes and regulations. That's what people see. So the less that I think it's important to talk about it, but I don't want to just delve on it all year long. And I really hate it when those things go viral, because it reflects on us as individuals, even though that is not our community. I never felt like, even though the poachers look like us and they're doing the same things we were doing, there's a whole different approach there to what they're doing compared to what ethical hunters are doing. So I think constantly getting the stories out, but then also prefacing those stories that this is not our community. Our community are law-abiding, ethical hunters that do it right within their own states. I think those are always important to highlight, but I also very much enjoy the stories of the elderly that are still getting out and getting it done. Where are we going to go in 2020? Are there any stories that you guys are starting to watch a little bit? I'll just open it up to the floor.
This is John. With the presidential election coming up, I think all hunters have the Second Amendment in common. I know bow hunting's big, particularly in the states where you have some firearm restrictions, but the Second Amendment issues are so intricately tied to hunting that that's something I definitely have on my radar already.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. Anybody else want to add in there?
Sure, I'll jump in. This is Tim. I'm hoping that in 2020, we see more CWD stories that are related to research and science, and maybe not less, but not as much about just the detection of it. We all know it's there, at least in the states that we have it, like Missouri. We typically know the regions, but I'm really interested in what occurs with the research and trying to solve the problem.
Gotcha. All right.
I would agree completely with that. Truthful and accurate education of the public is an area I hope we can get more news stories out. So that I agree wholeheartedly.
Very good. And Jim, you got anything that you're looking at that is of interest?
I think with that same thing that I mentioned earlier, just things that kind of help the sport, whether it's the management of CWD, calling out those people that break the rules or break the laws and poach, and making it clear that that's not how the rest of us do it. I think the categories I covered earlier, although that was kind of a at the end of the year type of analysis, I think those are generally the categories that our stories typically fall in. So whatever these guys send me, I'll be putting on the show.
Very cool. I do have to say I appreciate each and every one of you for contributing to the show, and I think the Deer News segment is a very important piece of the puzzle. I think it really highlights what's happening today, and I'm planning on making this time capsule each and every year. So I'm hoping that we can all get together as we go through this journey and do another panel at least next year. I'm kind of thinking that we need to do this like once a quarter, just to kind of recap what's going on, because hot topics are hot topics, and I think the more we can bring to our community to educate them is very important. So I do want to say thank you from the Big Buck Registry and from the Deer News as being part of that. It's really important to me. It's important to Jim, I'm sure, and to just our entire listener base.
Now here's Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Bedford County man considered oldest deer hunter in the country. This story is from the ABC 13 WSET website and was reported by Karen Pinto. It's deer hunting season for a man in Bedford County, Virginia. It will be his 40th year killing deer. 105-year-old Clyde Roberts is widely considered the oldest hunter in America. During hunting season, most afternoons you can find him in his tree stand watching for deer. Since turning 100 5 years ago, he's killed 13 deer and he's added 2 bucks just this season. When Clyde retired at 65, his son, Mike Roberts, taught him how to hunt, and now he is invited to hunt across the state and has garnered national attention. When he retired, I got him into deer hunting, and he's been doing it now for 40 years, explained Roberts. It's a father-son bonding time for the two of them. Clyde still has his eyesight, a sharp shot, and, of course, his sense of humor. It's just a pleasure for all things he gave me in my life to give him something back at 105 years of age, said Mike. At 105, hunting enthusiasts widely believe he's the oldest deer hunter in North America. His secret? Hard-working and living for the Lord. And he said he attributes hunting season to keeping him youthful as well. Hunting season has ended, and Roberts said he is already excited for next hunting season. Disabled 8-year-old hunter asked thieves to return stolen equipment. I want my stuff back. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Michael Barterimo. A disabled 8-year-old boy in Forest City, Arkansas, is asking the thieves who stole his custom hunting gear to bring it back. Jace Collum, who was partially paralyzed in a 2015 car accident, returned home from a stay in the hospital on Friday, only to learn that his specially made hunting stand was robbed, WREG reported. Jace's grandfather, Glenn Shepard, told the outlet he built the stand for his grandson to give Jace the same opportunities as other children. According to Shepard, the thieves pried the door open and ransacked the hunting stand, making off with a custom stand that was bolted to the floor, and now Jace isn't sure he'll have all the equipment he needs for an upcoming hunt. They stole the dead shot and all the things I had to help me hunt, he told WREG. Jace's family has contacted the Arkansas Fish and Game Commission, and they say no matter what, Jace isn't going to miss out on his hunt. You can't hold him back, and we wouldn't hold him back, because we want him to have the same opportunity that every kid has, Shepard says. Commenters on Facebook, too, have offered to help Jace replace his equipment. A representative for the Arkansas Fish and Game Commission confirmed to Fox News that the department is assisting with the St. Francis County Sheriff's Department in its investigation. Female poacher gets caught by Oklahoma game warden on dating app. This story is from the Louisiana Sportsman website. According to the Oklahoma Game Warden's Facebook page, a woman got caught bragging about killing a deer to a man she was conversing with on a dating app. Little did she know the man she was chatting with was an Oklahoma Game Warden. Game Warden Cannon Harrison of McIntosh County shared the following post. As game wardens, our personal lives are often blurred into our professional lives. This is often the case when it comes to social media, personal cell phones, and now dating apps. The woman he was conversing with on a dating app revealed she had just killed a big O buck. Obviously, not knowing Cannon is a game warden, her date night took a turn for the worst. Oklahoma game wardens arrived at the property where she killed the deer and made the illegal case. She has already pled guilty and paid multiple fines. Thanks to Warden Harrison for sharing this entertaining case. U.S. hunters look for permission to hunt deer in Jamaica. This story is from the Staybroke News website. Big game hunters in the United States are trying to get permission to head to Jamaica to hunt the white-tailed deer, which is reportedly breeding at an alarming rate and emerging as a major threat to the natural environment and agriculture, especially in the eastern parish of Portland. American Thomas McIntyre is seeking permission to take the hunters to Jamaica as a new tourism attraction while creating a lucrative income-generating stream for locals. McIntyre's interest was triggered by a Sunday Gleaner story last August in which terrestrial biologist Damian White advised that the white-tailed deer, an alien invasive species, was becoming a problem. They have no natural predators and are spreading fast, and this is because the food supply is good all year round, White said then. A very conservative estimate of the population is more than 6,000 in the wild, added White. According to the National Environment Protection Agency, there is no declared season in Jamaica to permit the hunting of the white-tailed deer. NEPA said it is at present administering survey instruments to gather further information on the whitetail's deer distribution and impact on the environment and the agricultural sector. Although Jamaicans may hunt the white-tailed deer for domestic purposes, this activity is presently not regulated. Hunting in protected areas such as forest reserves, game sanctuaries, and national parks is prohibited, said NEPA. 101-year-old grandma kills 2 deer with 1 shot. They both dropped right there. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Michelle Gant. Age is only a number, and one 101-year-old woman isn't letting it stop her from doing what she loves. Bertha Vickers of Morgantown, Mississippi, has been hunting and fishing most of her life. I don't know why everybody's making such a big deal about it, she told the Clarion Ledger last year after the outlet wrote a profile on her hunting accomplishment just shy of her 100th birthday. When you're as old as I am, you naturally think each one could be your last one, but I'm going to go as long as I can. I enjoy it. I love being outside, she said. This year, she's making headlines again for her success during deer season. Though it isn't the size of the deer that's caught people's attention this time, it's the amount. After missing 4 deer earlier in the season, she was determined to get one, and after spotting several, she got ready. I decided to wait for a bigger one. Before long, a bigger doe came out, and I shot, she said. But Vickers ended up killing 2 deer with the single shot. I saw 2 deer on the ground. It shot plumb through both of them. They both dropped right there. They didn't take another step. I knew it was back there. I didn't realize it was that close to her where it could get shot. Not letting any of her meat go to waste, Vickers ended up giving most of it to her grandkids and made steaks for herself. Wyoming man charged for poaching 114 deer and antelope. This story is from the Sporting Classics Daily website. A Sheridan County, Wyoming resident has been charged with 2 misdemeanors and 9 felonies for wanton destruction of big game animals. Greg Lambden, a 62-year-old Sheridan resident, turned himself into the Sheridan County Sheriff's Office on Tuesday, February 5th. The first 2 charges from July 2016 to November 2017 and December 2017 to March 2018 are high misdemeanors which each carry punishment of 1 year imprisonment and $10,000 fine. Each additional charge within a 10-year time period results in a felony offense. The other 9 charges Lambden faces are felony offenses which each carry a punishment of 2 years imprisonment and $5,000 to $10,000 in fines. Lambden, in total, faces up to 20 years in prison and fines up to $110,000. The charges stem from a 2-month investigation by Wyoming Game and Fish Department law enforcement officers after information was provided to them about possible illegal activity on a property outside of Sheridan. The Sheridan-based Wyoming Game and Fish Department wardens learned from Sheridan County residents on November 20th, 2018, that they had seen their neighbor, Lambden, beating a deer on his property. The residents continued to observe Lambden and saw him dragging several bloated carcasses of white-tailed deer around his property with a lawnmower. Another hunter on land adjacent to Lambden's property noticed several deer carcasses in the thickets when hunting in 2017. After in-depth investigation of the man and his property, a WGFD investigator observed and videotaped Lambden killing a deer and leaving the carcass on his property. A search warrant was served on November 27, 2018 in cooperation with the Sheridan County Sheriff's Office, and in all, 113 deer and 1 antelope were killed illegally, with 1 deer killed legally with a deer license on his property when a friend came to hunt with him. He said that he killed fawns, does, and bucks, like others kill prairie dogs, but that unfortunately the law did not see it that way, court documents said. Lambden was released Tuesday after Norris Allen Carlson paid the $10,000 cash-only bond. Lambden is not allowed to have contact with neighbors or anyone listed in the case information. A preliminary hearing has not yet been set. Pennsylvania's Sunday hunting bill passes game committee vote will move to Senate floor. This story is from the York Daily Record website and was reported by John Buffone. Pennsylvania just took the first step toward lifting the ban on Sunday hunting. The Pennsylvania Senate Game and Fisheries Committee approved Senate Bill 147 by a vote of 8-3, which will empower the Pennsylvania Game Commission to regulate Sunday hunting. The details of the vote were confirmed by Senator James R. Brewster's office. Brewster acts as the minority chair for the Game and Fish Committee. Senator Dan Laughlin, Republican from Erie, is the committee chairman and prime sponsor of the bill. Bill 147 will now be introduced to the floor of the Senate, where it will be voted on. If approved there, it will go to the State House of Representatives. If it makes it through the House in its original form, it will go to Governor Tom Wolf's desk for final approval. Crossbow proposal causes stir among Maine's deer hunters. This story is from the OutdoorNews.com website. The 3 largest hunting groups in Maine all oppose a proposal to allow the use of crossbows during the archery season for deer in the state. Deer hunting is a way of life in Maine where hundreds of hunters seek white-tailed deer every fall. But the hunting group said during a recent hearing that they fear adding crossbows to the hunt would reduce deer hunting opportunities for other sportsmen in the state. The Portland Press-Herald reports the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, the Maine Professional Guides Association, and the Maine Bowhunters Association all oppose the crossbow bill. However, a few hunters at the same legislative hearing spoke out in favor of adding the new hunting method to the season. The bill's sponsor says the change would encourage more people to hunt. California looks to enlist hunters in wildlife conservation push. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Bradford Betts. Put down the vape pens, cancel Zumba classes, and pick up a rifle. California is encouraging its residents to go out and hunt in an effort to rebrand the declining pastime. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife said Thursday it's partnering with other state and federal agencies to address barriers and opportunities to hunting and fishing in the state. Though their image for urban parts of the country suggests otherwise, hunters play an essential role in wildlife conservation. Since 1937, hunters have contributed more than $14 billion to the conservation of wildlife. But in the last 5 decades, the number of Americans over the age of 16 who hunt has dropped by half, according to the 2016 U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey. Fish and Wildlife Director Charlton H. Bonham said the agency has hired a task force to help change the public's perception of hunting and encourage people to get outdoors and enjoy California's wild places. California's latest state attempting to reach younger generations. Last month, a hunter recruiter for the Georgia Wildlife Federation told the Wall Street Journal, "Earthy crunchy aligns very well with deer hunting." Deadly zombie deer disease could possibly spread to humans, experts warn. This story is from the Fox News website and reported by Madeline Farber. A deadly disease that has affected the deer population in an estimated 24 states and 2 Canadian provinces could eventually spread and infect humans, experts warn. Speaking at the Minnesota State Capitol last week, experts from the University of Minnesota told lawmakers of the dangers of chronic wasting disease, or what the U.S. Geological Survey describes as a fatal neurological illness occurring in North American cervids, which are members of the deer family, including white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, and moose. Currently, there are no vaccines or treatments available for the disease, which scientists say spreads directly through animal-to-animal contact, but also indirectly through contaminated drinking water or food. While there have been no reported cases of CWD in people, Michael Osterholm, the director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota, told lawmakers that the disease should be treated as a public health issue, claiming human cases of CWD will likely be documented in the years ahead. It is possible that the number of human cases will be substantial and will not be isolated events, he said, in part according to the Twin Cities Pioneer Press. If Stephen King could write an infectious disease novel, he would write about prions like this, he added. Osterholm likened CWD to mad cow disease, which public health officials and those in the beef industry once did not think could infect people. It has since been confirmed that a cureless variant of mad cow, called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, can adversely impact humans. CWD and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease belong to the same family of diseases known as prion diseases, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. CWD was first detected in captive deer in the late 1960s, the CDC said. Symptoms of the disease include drooling, stumbling, lack of coordination, lack of fear of people, aggression, and listlessness, which explains the quote-unquote zombie deer disease nickname. The symptoms are a result of malformed prion that kills neurons in the infected animal's brain, the University of Minnesota explains. Osterholm echoed the CDC when warning the disease could potentially spread to humans in the future. Doctor says cure for CWD has been found. This story is from the bowhunting.com website and reported by Brody Swisher. There's not a hotter topic in the deer hunting community these days than chronic wasting disease. CWD is a root of calm discussions, hot-tempered debates about everywhere you look. Some say it's an out-of-control epidemic that's sweeping the country, while others say it's nothing more than nature doing what nature does. The bottom line is CWD and the impact it has on the future of deer hunting is a growing concern. More and more states are discovering new cases of CWD every year. That's why a recent video released by the Unified Sportsmen of Pennsylvania has been creating a lot of attention in the last week. The video states that a cure for CWD has been found. Dr. Frank Bastian of LSU's Department of Agriculture believes the disease is caused by a previously undiscovered species of bacteria called spiroplasma, not prions. Bastian's team is working on developing a 3-stage plan of attack, beginning in the first year with a diagnostic kit that would allow hunters to immediately test deer for the disease in the field. The ultimate goal is to develop a vaccine and cure for deer and elk in the wild. It's honestly a very bold statement, and the skeptics have shown up in a hurry. But what if these guys are onto something? What if this 3-stage approach to curing CWD will actually work? And beyond the deer herd, what if it could actually cure greater diseases and health concerns like Alzheimer's, as claims are being made? For a closer look at what Dr. John Evelyn had to say regarding a cure for CWD in a recent press conference in Pennsylvania, please check the Big Buck Registry Facebook pages for the link. The group seems to have gathered some support from local groups in Pennsylvania, but it's a different story when it comes to support from where it may matter the most, the Pennsylvania Game Commission. The commission responded with a skeptical statement saying decades of research have provided abundant evidence that prions are the infectious agent of CWD. The commission went on to say that while alternative theories exist, they have not been thoroughly researched. Other sources say that no one has yet to replicate the research mentioned above, nor does any wildlife agency accept the bacteria theory. This ultimately could be the biggest hurdle for Dr. Bastian's team. Without replication, does Bastian even have a solid, sound scientific foundation? Woman claims Tinder banned her over hunting photos, calls out double standard. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Alexandra Diabler. One woman was banned after taking a shot at love. A Vermont woman is claiming she was permanently removed from the popular dating app Tinder because of her hunting photos. The woman, who wishes to only be identified by her first name, Nicole, said she was vacationing in San Francisco and opened up Tinder to show her friend her profile. A couple of hours later, she opened the app. She said she got a notification and a gray screen that read, "Your account has been banned for activity that violates our terms of use." Nicole said she has 2 hunting photos of herself on the app, but that she cropped each picture to be in compliance with the app's regulations. "I cropped it so there were no weapons, no blood. My family, we are not trophy hunters, we hunt for food," Nicole told ABC7. "We respect the animal, we respect the outdoors, we eat every part of the deer that we can and only take shots when we feel it's going to be a good shot and it's going to take the animal as quickly and painlessly as possible." However, someone in the Bay Area found Nicole's photo of her with a harvested deer to be offensive and reported it into the app, as well as tracked down her employer and sent him a message about the hunting pictures. Nicole was shocked, finding none of her profile pictures offensive. She reached out to Tinder to inquire about the ban, but received no response until she posted on Twitter, along with a handful of men who had also posted hunting photos and had not been banned. Nicole's profile was reinstated, and Tinder is looking into the matter. She also reached out to report the original user for harassment after emailing her boss. However, there has been no update as to whether her profile was banned, and Nicole is not sure if she wants to continue using Tinder. A spokesperson for Tinder said in a statement to Fox News, "We are committed to maintaining a positive ecosystem and take any reports of behavior that is contrary to our terms of use or community guidelines very seriously. We have a team dedicated to investigating each report. The account in question has been reported multiple times. The matter has been resolved and they can now use Tinder." New bill would let landowners sell deer permits to out-of-state hunters. This story is from the KSNT.com website and reported by Alec Gartner. Deer hunting is a big moneymaker for many rural areas in Kansas. People travel across the state, even from other states, to participate. A new bill in the legislature would give those people outside of the state a new way to hunt in Kansas. Mickey Holloway runs Heartland Outdoor Trophy Hunts, a business that helps out-of-towners hunt in Kansas. He believes the new bill, which would allow people that own at least 80 acres to sell the deer permit they acquire to an out-of-state hunter, is a good idea. He said the reputation of big bucks in Kansas will always have people wanting to hunt here. Not everyone sees it that way, though. If you start allowing more people to come in and hunt and just hunt those, we're going to lose genetics. We're going to lose that revenue that we're gaining in this state through out-of-state hunters, said State Representative Eric Smith. But Corbett said each person has the option if they want to use the program. The bill would let 1 permit to be sold per landowner. It is planned for a final vote in the House Wednesday, and if passed, will head to the Senate. The legislature has failed to pass similar bills in years past, and on Tuesday, the House narrowly moved the bill forward by just 3 votes. Former Steubenville, Ohio officer sentenced for poaching scheme. This story is from the dailyjeff.com website. A former Steubenville police officer has been sentenced along with 4 other men for running an illegal poaching scheme in Jefferson County, Ohio, Attorney General Dave Yost announced at the end of January. A 3-year investigation by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife, with assistance from the Bureau of Criminal Investigations Environmental Enforcement Unit, found that former officer Nathan Klein and his accomplices took paying clients to private and public properties to hunt without approval from landowners. The crimes occurred from 2006 to 2017. Assistant Attorneys General from Yost's office served as special assistant prosecutors for the case. Judge Michelle Miller of the Jefferson County Common Pleas Court sentenced Klein to 2 years in prison, 5 years of probation, and ordered him to pay restitution of $29,165 to the Ohio DNR Division of Wildlife. Klein, who was the ringleader of the group, also had his hunting license suspended for 3 years and must pay a $3,000 fine. He was convicted in December of 5 felony charges, including attempted engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity and unauthorized use of the law enforcement automated data systems, LEADS, in addition to 11 misdemeanor wildlife violations. The city of Steubenville fired him in October. The other men sentenced included Marlon Hale, 3 months in jail, 6 months in community-based correction facility, 5 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, 3-year hunting license suspensions, $3,000 in fines, and $2,600 in restitution. Robert Gilbert, 910 days in jail, which was suspended, 5 years of probation, 3 years hunting license suspension, $6,000 fine, and $18,725 in restitution. Waylon Dietrich, 90 days in jail, which was suspended, 2 years of probation, $1,000 fine, $1,000 restitution, and Richard Haar, $750 fine, $1,250 in restitution. 2 other men, Joshua McLaren and Ronnie Griffith, were sentenced previously to 1-year hunting license suspension in order to pay fines and restitutions of more than $1,000 each for their roles in the scheme. New study finds deer species react differently to wolves. This story is from the Flathead Beacon News website. A new study shows that different types of deer react differently when approached by hungry wolves. Researchers at the University of Washington recently studied how wolves are interacting with 2 species of deer in the state, the white-tailed and the mule deer. The study found that white-tailed deer are graceful runners who will seek flat ground in an effort to outrun wolves, but mule deer have developed a quick jump escape technique that makes them appear to go bouncing off on a pogo stick. This is effective for escaping on uneven, rocky ground. The researchers found that mule deer will move to higher elevations and steeper slopes to avoid the predators. White-tailed deer are more comfortable running from wolves and sometimes move to flatter ground where they can better see wolves coming. Remember these facts on your next hunt. Road commissions ask whoever's leaving deer bait on side of the highway to stop. This story is from the Up North Live website and was reported by Anne Marie Kent. The Chippewa County, Michigan Road Commission is asking whoever is putting deer feed on the side of the road to stop. Corn is being put on the shoulder of M48 between Prentice Bay Road and Gettsville, and it's attracting deer. The Road Commission said when one of their drivers approached the area, more than 20 deer were on the shoulder of the highway. They said it causes hazardous conditions for both deer and drivers. Colorado Parks and Wildlife cracked down on illegal antler collecting. This story is from the KJCT8.com website and was reported by Sierra Ferguson. You could face steep fines if you're caught collecting shed antlers in western Colorado. The season for shed hunting will open on May 1st. Since January 1st, restrictions on collecting shed antlers have been in effect on all public lands west of Interstate 25. Those restrictions go through April 30th. Additional restrictions apply in the Gunnison Basin. The new season guidelines were launched last year, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife say they focus on educating the public. Now they're shifting that focus to enforcement. If you're caught collecting antlers before May 1st, you could be cited, fined, and have points marked against your hunting or fishing license. Why has the season been adjusted? To protect deer and elk across the state. According to the CPW Public Information Officer Mike Porras, shed hunters have been putting pressure on the wildlife while they're at their most vulnerable. Shed hunters, Porras said, might not be the only people recreating on public lands and potentially disturbing wildlife, but shed hunters, unlike other forms of recreation, can be regulated to reduce stress for the animals. According to Porras, by May, the landscape should be greener, grazing conditions should improve. Often elk and deer move to higher elevations. This makes it less dangerous for herds to come in contact with humans, like those that are hoping to find their antlers. Opening day change is official for Pennsylvania deer hunters. This story is from the TribLive.com website and was reported by Bob Fry. The change, and it's a big one, is official. Opening day of Pennsylvania's statewide firearms deer season is moving. It has been the Monday after Thanksgiving each year since 1963. This year it will be the Saturday after Thanksgiving. In changing things, game commissioners cited the possibility a Saturday opener could potentially boost hunting license sales and participation by making their sport more accessible to college students and working people. Surveys on the popularity of the change did not show that this decision was necessarily popular with many hunters. Whether it's the right decision or not is hard to predict. Answers about its impact on the future for hunting in the state, good or bad, likely won't come for a few years. A man was fatally attacked by a pet deer. His wife barely escaped. This story is from the Washington Post website and was reported by Dina Paul. Paul McDonald went outside to feed his pet deer on Wednesday morning. The Australian father never came back inside. His wife Mandy and the couple's 17-year-old son Ethan heard that something was amiss on their property in northeast Victoria. They ventured outside and discovered Paul being attacked, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. Ethan ran off seeking help as Mandy tried to save her husband. The male stag, which the couple had owned for 2 years, shifted his attention and aggression towards her. Ethan was able to save his mother from the animal by whacking the deer in the head with a slab of wood. At time of publication, the ABC reported that she had been airlifted to a Melbourne hospital and was in critical condition. She suffered injuries to her upper body and legs. Responding officers shot and killed the deer at the scene, citing concerns for the paramedic safety, but it was too late for Paul McDonald. The farmer died from the deer-inflicted injuries before he could be rushed to the hospital. Deer experts have had mixed reactions. The ABC quoted Steve Garlick, chairman of the Deer Management Committee at the Australian Deer Association, as saying, "Deer are much less likely to attack anyone than they are to run away from them." But others familiar with the stag species are less surprised to hear of Wednesday's attack. The fall's months are deer mating season, Barry Howlett of the Australian Deer Association told the Morning Herald. With higher testosterone levels, they can be more aggressive. It's not an everyday occurrence, but it's not unheard of for deer to kill people in that situation, he said. Proposal would prohibit shooting bucks in Buffalo County, Wisconsin, one of America's top deer hunting destinations. This story is from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel website and was reported by Paul A. Smith. The Buffalo County Deer Advisory Council has recommended an antlerless-only hunting season for 2019. The measure would prohibit shooting of bucks and is intended to reduce the white-tailed deer population. Highly controversial in the hunting community at large, perhaps nowhere would such a proposal arouse more emotion than in Buffalo County, regarded by many as the #1 trophy buck destination in America. The council's 4-1 vote in favor of an antlerless-only season was made Tuesday at a public meeting in Alma. In addition to raising the ire of hunters and outfitters, it is also likely to focus attention on the failure of current hunting regulations to control burgeoning deer herds despite the best intentions of local residents. The council has a goal of decreasing the county's deer herd, but last year, even when 3 antlerless tags were issued for each hunting license, the deer population increased 12%, according to the Department of Natural Resources. Considered the most severe option in the Wisconsin deer regulation toolbox, the antlerless-only regulation is opposed by many hunters who prefer to target, or at least have the option to shoot, bucks. Man poaches, then freezes 20-point buck. This story is from the American Hunter website. Indiana conservation officers report that a Dubois County man has pled guilty to illegally taking a potential record-breaking whitetail buck. Mark Gill, 56, shot a non-typical 20-point buck with more than 200 inches of antler in 2016 after previously taking a buck earlier in the year. In a clear violation of Indiana's one-buck regulation, Gill caped out the second buck he killed and kept it frozen for a year with the intention of claiming the kill the following season. Once the 2017 season rolled around, he took the buck to the check station, and in doing so committed another crime by providing false information to Indiana's Deer Harvest Information System. Gill was caught and pled guilty to 2 charges: unlawful taking of a white-tailed deer, a Class B misdemeanor, and providing false information to a check station, a Class C misdemeanor. As part of Gill's plea agreement with the Dubois County Prosecutor's Office, his hunting license privileges are suspended for 2 years. Gill must also serve 100 hours of community service, serve 540 days probation, and pay $741 in fines and court costs, including a $500 replacement fee. Because Indiana is a member of the Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact, Gill's Indiana hunting license suspension will also result in a suspension of potential hunting, fishing, and trapping licenses in the other 47 member states, excluding Massachusetts and Hawaii. Alabama lawmakers approve hunting deer with bait. This story is from the AL.com website and was reported by Mike Kaysen. A bill to allow hunters to buy licenses to hunt deer and feral hogs over bait has passed the Alabama legislature after several years of falling short. Under current law, hunters must be at least 100 yards away and out of the line of sight of bait. Under the bill that passed today, hunters could buy a bait privilege license that would exempt them from the 100-yard line of sight rule. Alabama hunters would pay a $15 annual fee. Out-of-state residents would pay $51. The bill, by Senator Jack Williams, a Republican from Wilmer, passed the House today by a vote of 83 to 12. Government Kay Ivey could sign it into law. Representative Danny Crawford, a Republican from Athens, who sponsored the bill in the House, said some hunters already use bait and the law is hard to enforce. Crawford said the license fees would provide revenue for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to help protect the state's deer population and the tourism dollars hunters spend in Alabama. He said the agency needs more revenue to guard against chronic wasting disease and other potential threats to deer. Crawford said the bill could provide limited help with the crop destruction and other problems caused by feral hogs. Alabama Department Conservation Commissioner Christopher Blankenship said the department did not initiate the bill but was not opposed to it. Blankenship said lawmakers added an amendment at the department's request to allow the department to suspend baiting privileges in certain areas if there is threat of a disease outbreak. Blankenship said revenues from the privilege licenses would be used for enforcement, research, and efforts to increase public access to hunting. What deer hunters should know about the EPA's latest review of glyphosate. This story is from the Quality Deer Management website and is reported by Lindsey Thomas Jr. The Environmental Protection Agency recently completed a required periodic review of glyphosate's registration as a legal pesticide, and the product survived the process. Glyphosate remains legal and, according to the EPA, safe when used by the label guidelines. However, the EPA is recommending a few adjustments to the label that some of its critics may appreciate. After an exhaustive review of available international research, convening of expert panels, and a thorough weight of the evidence review, the EPA continues to find that glyphosate is not likely to be carcinogenic to humans, nor did it identify non-cancer health concerns when glyphosate is used according to the label. New assessments did identify potential risks for mammals and birds. Where food plotters and deer habitat managers are concerned, the potential health risks or level of concern for mammals and birds feeding on plants treated with glyphosate was primarily for spot treatment mix rates rather than the lesser mix rates used on larger applications of the herbicide. The other area of potential risk identified by the EPA is the review of spray drift, glyphosate being carried by the wind away from its target areas into bordering vegetation. The EPA admitted that pollinators, including bees and monarch butterflies, are harmed when important plants like milkweed for monarchs are killed by drifting glyphosate. In the broader world of agriculture and forestry beyond food plots, is glyphosate being over-applied or misused? Yes, one confirmed result of over-reliance is glyphosate-resistant weeds, which QDMA has warned against. But addressing worldwide misuse of the herbicide goes beyond the scope of QDMA's mission. Where deer and deer hunters are concerned, glyphosate is safe for use by habitat managers when they follow the label. Secretary Bernhardt proposes increasing public access to hunting and fishing on 1.4 million acres nationwide. This story is from the Department of Interior website. Furthering the Trump administration's efforts to increase access to public lands, U.S. Secretary of the Interior David Bernhardt today announced from Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge in Oak Harbor, Ohio, a proposal for new or expanded hunting and fishing opportunities at 74 national wildlife refuges and 15 national fish hatcheries managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service across more than 1.4 million acres. The proposal would increase the number of units in the service's National Wildlife Refuge system where the public may hunt from 377 to 382, and the number where fishing would be permitted would be increased from 312 to 316. The proposal would also formally open lands on 15 hatcheries of the National Fish Hatchery System to hunting or sport fishing for the first time. The proposal also outlines a comprehensive revision and simplification of all refuge-specific hunting and fishing regulations in all 50 states to more closely match state regulations while continuing to ensure safe and compatible opportunities. The service worked closely with the states in preparing the proposed rule. New proposed refuge opportunities include lands and waters in Wisconsin, Wyoming, Colorado, Ohio, Texas, Florida, Illinois, Missouri, and Washington state. Hunting, fishing, and other outdoor activities contributed more than $156 billion to economic activity in communities across the United States in 2016, according to the service's National Survey of Fishing, Hunting, and Wildlife-Associated Recreation, published every 5 years. More than 101 million Americans, 40% of the U.S. population aged 16 and older, pursue wildlife-related recreation, including hunting and fishing. The service will seek comments from the public on the proposed rule for 45 days, beginning with publication in the Federal Register in coming days. The notice will be available at www.regulations.gov, docket number FWS-HQ-NWRS-2019-0040, and will include details on how to submit your comments. The service intends to finalize the proposed changes in time for the upcoming 2019 and 2020 hunting seasons. A complete list of all refuges and hatcheries in the proposal is available in the proposed rule and online on the www.fws.gov website. Rare pitch black deer was just spotted in West Michigan. This story is from the Detroit Free Press website and was reported by Alina Sakon. A rare pitch black deer was recently spotted and photographed about 150 miles north of Grand Rapids. According to the Quality Deer Management Association, the black deer spotted is a rarity called a melanistic whitetail, and they're harder to spot than albino or piebald deer. Bel Air-based real estate agent John Roach posted photos of the extraordinary sighting on his Facebook page Thursday. The Deer Association said this unusual coloration is due to a random genetic anomaly and believed to be a result of a mutated gene, thus causing the melanism. The first known melanistic whitetail spotted on record was in 1929, the association said, but these pitch black deer have been reported in Michigan, Mississippi, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Texas, and South Carolina. Are you putting yourself at risk for Lyme disease? This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Susan Abram. With reported cases of tick-borne illnesses on the upswing across the nation, experts and specialists say the public needs to do more to avoid risks. A record number of cases of tick-borne diseases were reported by state and local health departments in 2017, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In total, tick-borne illnesses increased by 22% from a total of 48,610 reported cases in 2016 to a total of 59,349 reported cases in 2017. The last year data was available. A majority of those were Lyme disease, health officials said. Reported cases capture only a fraction of the overall number of people with tick-borne illnesses, health experts for the CDC recently noted. Even so, the number of reported cases of Lyme disease in the United States has tripled since the late 1990s. Most Lyme disease cases are reported from May to August. The illness often occurs when a young infected tick called a nymph bites into skin and transmits bacteria. The tiny arachnid prefers to attach itself to warm parts of the body, such as your groin, armpits, or scalp. Everyone from Connecticut to California, North Dakota to Texas needs to take precaution. The CDC offers the following tips. Use insect repellent that contains permethrin to treat clothing and gear such as boots, pants, socks, and tents. Wear clothing pre-treated with permethrin. Conduct a full-body tick check on yourself, children, pets as soon as coming in from the outdoors. One of the easiest way to do this is to get undressed and hop in the shower. Put clothes in a dryer for 10 minutes or more after coming in from the outdoors. Check and clean the lint trap too. Colorado Parks and Wildlife say that wildlife rehabilitation centers could run out of room for rescued fawns. This story is from the 4 CBS News website. Colorado Parks and Wildlife is concerned that rehabilitation centers are running out of room for all the rescued fawns in their care. There are already 7 at the Wet Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, and 2 more were brought into the CPW office in Colorado Springs Friday morning. One fawn was seen running alone along Highway 24 near Manitou Springs. Another was orphaned after its mother and twin were killed by a car near Cascade. On Thursday, officers rescued another fawn whose mother was killed after being hit by a motorcycle on Interstate 70 in Golden. CPW officials say the Wildlife Rehab Center, where they send these animals, is filling up fast. Officials are reminding people to not touch fawns they see alone in the wild. Young wildlife is frequently left alone in a safe location while adults go on the search for food. Young fawns and calves are left for long periods of time and are safer when they are left alone. If you come across young wildlife, do not approach them as the mother is probably nearby, officials stated. If you do encounter young wildlife on the trail or in your yard, leave the animal where it is and be careful to keep pets out of the area. Use binoculars to quietly view the animals from a distance. Do not get too close to the animals as human proximity may make the wild parents afraid to return. They are also asking drivers to keep an eye out for deer on highways. Iowa City turns to bow hunters to manage urban deer herd. This story is from the KCCI 8 Des Moines website. Iowa City is turning to bow hunters to help manage the deer population within the city. The Iowa City Press-Citizen reports that City Council reluctantly approved adding winter bow hunts beginning in 2020 and continuing through 2024. In addition, sharpshooters will be brought in to cull the herd this next winter. City officials had wanted to stick with managing the deer herd largely with sharpshooters, but the State Natural Resources Commission wanted bow hunting to be part of the plan and wouldn't approve a plan without it. The bow hunting will help ensure that the deer population remains at a density of fewer than 10 deer per square mile. Colorado man receives lifetime ban on hunting, fishing, and trapping after investigation. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Alexandra Diebler. A Colorado man received a lifetime hunting, fishing, and trapping ban after an investigation into his activities led to a felony conviction. Jeff Bodnar of Hartselle, Colorado, was arrested and charged with 22 crimes related to illegal hunting and trapping activities, the Wildlife Parks and Wildlife Northeast region shared in a press release. The 46-year-old, who has had his hunting, fishing, trapping privileges suspended twice before, pleaded guilty in May to unlawful possession of 2 black bears and a mountain lion, as well as possession of a weapon by a previous offender. The Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission handed down the lifetime suspension in June, following an investigation that started in 2014 after a report was received that Bodnar was hunting and trapping while his license was suspended. Mr. Bodnar appears to possess a complete disregard for Colorado's hunting laws and a total indifference for wildlife, said Wildlife Officer Ian Petkesh. We take these investigations seriously because of the toll someone like this can take on local wildlife populations. Bodnar has been the subject of illegal hunting investigations before. In 2008, he was convicted of conspiracy to violate the Lacey Act of 1900, which prohibits selling or trading wildlife or fish that has been possessed illegally, and received 27 months in federal prison. If he is found to violate the lifetime ban, Bodnar faces fines up to $10,000 and 90 days in jail. The only things thriving are the buzzards. Limited deer feeding allowed in Delta flood. This story is from the Mississippi Clarion Ledger website and is reported by Brian Broom. Mississippi's South Delta has been flooded for months, and some wildlife populations are struggling as a result. In response, the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks recently announced limited supplemental feeding of deer is now allowed in Issaquah and Warren counties. Melissa Lyons and her husband, Sherwood Lyons of Vicksburg, witnessed the toll on wildlife, particularly deer, on a regular basis. The two raise cattle on the levee and have seen the effect of nutritional stress on the local deer population. Melissa said when her husband cuts hay, deer in the field are so weak from the lack of food resources that he has to cut off his tractor and physically touch them to make them move out of the way. Then there are the dead. He's pulled 20 out of the hayfield in one day, Melissa said. It's never been this bad for this long. They don't have anywhere else to go. They're exhausted, they're starving. The only things thriving are the buzzards. Supplemental feeding of deer was banned in the area after chronic wasting disease was discovered in Issaquah County in 2018. The disease is fatal for deer and thought to be spread through direct and indirect contact of deer, so the department banned supplemental feeding in the area to prevent unnatural concentrations of deer. Deer hit by planes. It's happened twice this year at New Jersey airports. This story is from the Courier Post online website and was reported by Gerald Stoss Hout. New Jersey drivers are familiar with the occasional deer strike, but deer on runways? Twice in recent months, pilots have struck deer that have wandered onto airport grounds. In May, a pilot told National Transportation Safety Board investigators he had just lifted off at South Jersey Regional Airport in Lumberton when a deer struck the fuselage on the right side, according to a report recently made available. The pilot, a 75-year-old West Hampton, Burlington County man with nearly 3,000 hours of flight time, was able to bring the plane back into a landing pattern and safely put it on the ground. Photographs of the damage show the elevator completely removed from the aircraft. Neither the pilot or the co-pilot reported injuries. And in February, a Cessna 172 pilot struck and killed 2 deer, the NTSB said in a report issued last week. Perimeter fencing at this airport only covers the eastern and southern sides, and an airport manager told NTSB investigators that deer were frequently seen in and around the airport. A deer strike occurred at least once every 2 years, the manager told investigators, according to the report. MDC and State of Missouri increased penalties for poaching. This story is from the Missouri Department of Conservation news release. The Missouri Department of Conservation, the MDC, and the Missouri Legislature and Governor have taken actions to increase penalties for those caught poaching Missouri game animals and other native wildlife species. Missouri Governor Michael Parsons signed HB 260 into law July 11th. Called the Poaching Bill, it significantly raises fines for those convicted of illegally taking Missouri game species and other native wildlife. HB 260 was sponsored by Representative Jared Taylor of Republic and Senator Mike Bernskoder of Jefferson City. New fine amounts include $10,000 to $15,000 for each elk or black bear killed illegally, $1,000 to $5,000 for each white-tailed buck, $500 to $1,000 for each wild turkey, and $500 to $1,000 for each paddlefish. Supporters of the bill said the previous fines for poaching were too low in Missouri. The bill also gained support in part from 5 Missouri elk that were illegally killed by poachers in the past few years. None of the cases has yet been solved. The fines are considered restitution payments for poaching game animals and are ordered by a judge. Monies from the fines go to the state's School Monies Fund. The The restitution payments are in addition to other fines and penalties for violating the Wildlife Code of Missouri. The new fines will go into effect on August 28th. DNR monitoring beach-going deer considering tranquilizing possibility. This story is from the MLive.com website and reported by Melissa Frick. A white-tailed deer captured this weekend on video interacting with beachgoers along Lake Michigan is being monitored by state wildlife officials due to the safety risk. One of the options being considered, although no decision has been made, is to shoot the deer with a tranquilizer and relocate it away from the popular beach at Saugatuck Dunes State Park. A video went viral of the deer at Saugatuck Dunes State Park on Saturday, July 6, where it was seen walking up to the water and hanging out around dozens of people for more than half an hour. Because the deer has shown it's become accustomed to human presence, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources is monitoring the deer to make sure it doesn't become a safety hazard to humans, said Don Pope, a wildlife biologist at the Michigan DNR Wildlife Division. Holly Vaughn, a Michigan DNR Wildlife Communication Coordinator, said the division is considering a number of options for dealing with the buck if it becomes a safety hazard to humans. One of those options could be chemically immobilizing or tranquilizing the buck. Pope said it's still too early to tell which route the Michigan DNR will take in dealing with the buck. The department has been monitoring this buck for the past month and working with park staff to encourage people not to touch or approach the buck. No deer season in part of Mississippi? It's possible. This story is from the Clarion Ledger website and was reported by Brian Broom. Mississippi's South Delta has been flooded for most of the year, and that has taken its toll on wildlife. Pictures of dead and emaciated deer have been seen untold times on social media, and people are concerned about the condition and size of the herd. In response, the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks is polling hunters who hunt the area, and options in the poll about the coming deer season range from no change in the season to no season at all. No season at all would take a majority vote. Harvest and mortality data, as well as camera surveys, will also be taken into consideration. Reactions to the situations are mixed. J.T. Baum of Pascagoula said he'd prefer the season be closed entirely in the South Delta. Others commented on social media, and preferences range from shortening the season to closing or shortening the season in the worst affected areas. Missouri Department of Conservation has new rules for deer carcasses in ongoing fight against CWD. This story is from an MDC news release. Starting in 2020, the MDC has added additional regulations to the Wildlife Code of Missouri as part of its ongoing effort to slow down the spread of chronic wasting disease. The new regulations change the requirements for transporting deer carcasses into Missouri and throughout the state, and also add carcass disposal requirements for meat processors and taxidermists. The Missouri Conservation Commission initially approved the changes at its May meeting and gave final approval at its August 23rd meeting in Jefferson City. The changes will become effective February 29th of 2020. The MDC will provide the full regulations in the 2020 Wildlife Code of Missouri and in its 2020 Fall Deer and Turkey Hunting Regulations and Information Booklet, available where permits are sold starting in early July 2020. Most states with CWD have similar restrictions on carcass movement and disposal, said MDC Resource Science Division Chief and deer biologist Jason Sumners. CWD remains a rare disease in our state, and we want to keep it that way. According to MDC, most deer hunters would not be affected by the proposed regulations, and most meat processors and taxidermists are already disposing of deer carcasses. Mule deer, white-tailed deer expand range into Alaska. This story is from the KNBA website and is reported by Claire Strempel. New species of deer are moving into parts of Alaska, including the Upper Lynn Canal. Alaska Department of Fish and Game is gathering information on these ungulates. White-tailed and mule deer are not native to Alaska, but the state's Department of Fish and Game says they're colonizing the 49th state. That's starting in areas proximate to the Canadian border, where whitetails and mule deer are known to live. Carl Cook is an area wildlife management biologist in Juneau. He oversees the Upper Lynn Canal Game Management Unit 1D. In May, Cook got a photo that allowed him to identify a mule deer in the Skagway area. According to a Fish and Game publication, mule deer have been seen in Fairbanks and even the North Pole. Cook says the park department has received reports of white-tailed deer near Haines. Smaller Sitka blacktail deer are also common in the area. You can tell who's who by watching their hindquarters. Mule deer have a large white patch on the rump, and the tip of the tail is black. White-tailed deer have broad tails that are white when raised. Both species are bigger than Sitka blacktail deer. It's not unusual for animals to expand their range, but the Department of Fish and Game doesn't know why these deer are migrating or what they're bringing with them. They're concerned deer from Canada may bring in wasting disease or ticks. Since the department is eager to learn more about these populations, it's open season on all mule deer and whitetails. Cook asks that hunters send photographs and samples, which is a nice way of saying big chunks of dead deer. State hunting regulations say you have to call Cook before taking a deer, but he's got an update. He'd rather have hunters go ahead and get the sample than let a deer go because they didn't have a chance to call. The department will return the meat and the antlers. Black-tailed deer are common in southeast Alaska, but there's no hunting season for them in Unit 1D. Their population isn't robust enough to support it, so Cook says to be careful when identifying the white-tailed and mule deer. CDC warns hunters after man likely contracted tuberculosis from deer. This story is from the WGN9 website. With deer season just around the corner, the Centers for Disease Control are warning hunters about tuberculosis. Officials with the CDC issued the warning after learning that a man likely contracted tuberculosis after dressing a deer. In May of 2017, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services learned of a case of pulmonary tuberculosis caused by Mycobacterium bovis in a 77-year-old man. Officials learned that although the patient wasn't around anyone with tuberculosis, he had regularly hunted and field-dressed deer. Investigators learned that free-ranging deer in the area were often infected with M. bovis. As a result, researchers have found a few other cases where an animal infected with tuberculosis actually spread the disease to humans. However, they say it is understudied. Officials say the bacteria can be inhaled while the deer is field-dressed. To prevent exposure to M. bovis and other diseases, hunters are encouraged to use personal protective equipment while field-dressing deer, the CDC says. Hunter mistaken for deer, shot, killed by friend in Glynn County, Georgia. This story is from the First Coast News website. A 17-year-old boy was shot and killed in Glynn County after being mistaken for a deer Saturday, according to police. Glynn County police arrived at a wooded area in the 500 block of Myers Hill Road in response to reports of a person shot. Once there, officers met with a group of hunters at Friendly Express on highways 82 and 303. Witnesses told police that all the parties involved knew each other and came from the Myers Hill area to go hunting, according to a police news release from police. During the hunt, Bobby Lane, 17, was in an area of heavy foliage and was mistaken for a deer, police said. Officers said he was shot by Hector Romero, 32. Romero helped take Lane to Friendly Express to an awaiting ambulance. Lane was later pronounced dead at a hospital, according to the news release. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources was called to investigate with Glynn County Police. The investigation is ongoing and no arrests were made. There is a GoFundMe that the family has set up in his honor. Putnam County man faces hunting-related charges for killing deer worth around $4,500 without the proper license. This story is from the WTHI TV 10 website and was posted by Chris Essex. A Putnam County man is facing charges after officials used his cell phone records to bust him for multiple hunting violations. The investigation started last November after a complaint of someone hunting from an off-road vehicle and trespassing. Around the same time, 37-year-old David McCullough from Green Cattle claimed he killed a trophy-class deer. Conservation officers checked their records and found inconsistent reporting of the killed deer. They say an interview showed even more discrepancies. That is when officials used a search warrant to check McCullough's phone. They say data from the search shows a text from McCullough that same day that claims he was planning to hunt without a valid hunting license. McCullough allegedly sent messages describing the deer he killed with time and date stamps from about 45 minutes before he bought the correct license online. The deer McCullough killed has an estimated value of $4,500 due to its size. McCullough is facing multiple hunting-related charges. Hunter bags rare antlered doe, deer of a lifetime. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Janine Puhak. One Oklahoma hunter was recently in for quite a surprise when he realized the antlered deer he shot was not a male but rather a female doe. Outdoorsman Chris Blades was on the prowl in Seminole County when he harvested what he initially suspected to be an extremely non-typical buck that was in fact biologically female. Officials for the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation have since described the doe as the deer of a lifetime. Biologists say this can occur in an average of 1 in 10,000 does. Reps for the OWC wrote on Facebook, "For this reason, regulations for deer are referred to as antlered and antlerless, not buck and doe," the department said, sharing 3 images of Blade's catch in a post that has since been liked more than 2,200 times. When contacted for comment, ODWC Big game biologist Dallas Barber confirmed to Fox News that Blade's catch was a white-tailed deer and described the antlered female as, quote, very rare. While it is very rare, we do see 1 or 2 antlered deer harvested each year. It is caused by a hormonal imbalance, Barber said. As long as deer season is open and you are abiding by our management zone's designated doe days, it is never illegal to harvest a doe, he said. This might be the new world record whitetail. This story is from the Meat Eater website and was reported by Spencer Newharth. Social media is abuzz this morning as deer hunters fawn over what might be the new world record whitetail. Gunnar Womack, a teen out of Oklahoma, arrowed this incredible 8x8 buck last night while hunting over a wheat field. An initial score by Womack's dad put the buck at 201 inches net and 214 inches gross. Womack said the 13-inch difference comes from the shorter left G2 and broken main beam on the right side. The current world record typical whitetail is the famous Hansen buck, which has just over 213 inches of net antler. Womack has a better shot at claiming the new world record for a typical whitetail taken with archery equipment. That record belongs to Mel Johnson and has stood since 1965. Mel's perfect 6x6 Illinois deer scored 204 inches. Even if he can't reach the Hansen or Johnson buck, Womack will likely beat the current Oklahoma typical record of 194 inches. Womack's buck will certainly be close, but he'll have to wait another 59 days to get an official Boone & Crockett measurement. The club requires a drying period before taking a final score, which sometimes leads to as much as 5 inches in score lost. New research sheds light on lunar phase impact on white-tailed deer. This story is from the Spokesman Review website and was reported by John Hayes. Conventional wisdom has long held that deer are more active on moonlit nights and most active under a full moon. The day after, the conjecture followed deer move around less in the daylight. Research from 2017 says maybe not. That's because 2 years ago, the Penn State College of Agricultural Sciences published research suggesting that the moon and its phases have little to no impact on deer mobility by day or night. The research used GPS-monitored positions of does 2 years old or greater collected in October 2015 and October 2016. The original research had tracked those does on an hourly basis, providing better positioning data. The statistical model combined the elements of sunrise, sunset, hour of day, and moon phase, defined as a full moon being greater than 67% illuminated, a partial moon being 33% to 67% illuminated, and a new moon less than 33% illuminated. Tens of thousands of data points were tracked by Jessica Hepner, a Penn State undergrad awarded a summer research grant to analyze deer forest study data. The GPS telemetry showed that the deer moved nearly 200 feet per hour at night and fewer than 165 feet per hour during daylight hours. They moved from about 400 to 450 feet per hour at sunset and sunrise and were more active near dusk than dawn. Overlaid against the periods of full moon, the study showed that the deer traveled fewer than 20 feet further per hour during nights with a new moon. In daylight, during periods of partial moon phase, they moved about 13 feet farther. Dwayne Diefenbach, adjunct professor of wildlife ecology and leader of the Pennsylvania Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit at Penn State, says that while the study was based on more data and used better technology than previous moon phase studies, more work could be done. Young Minnesota hunter 11 bags 12-point buck on her very first hunt. This story is from the Fox News website and was posted by Michael Holland. An 11-year-old girl in Minnesota surprised even her father when she bagged an impressive 12-point buck last week. Making the feat even more impressive, it was the young girl's first time shooting on a hunt. Lily Mickelson took the buck down around dinner time on Friday night, Fox 9 reports. She was out on a hunting trip with her father, Luke, and the pair reportedly waited 2 hours before spotting the animal. Lily fired on the buck and managed to hit it in the back, she said, explaining that she had to approach the buck and shoot it a couple of times before it died completely. Meanwhile, Luke told the news outlet he was still in shock over his daughter's achievement, adding that he couldn't have been any more proud. He also claims that when he tells his friends about his daughter's accomplishment, they don't believe him, which is why he keeps a photograph for evidence. Fortunately, it seems that Lily isn't letting her dad's bragging give her a big ego. I just kind of laugh and say, well, I just got lucky, she told Fox 9. Arkansas hunter dead after deer he shot apparently gets up and attacks him. This story is from the Fox News website, reported by Nicole Dara. A hunter in Arkansas died after a deer he shot turned the tables and reportedly attacked him. Thomas Alexander, 66, is believed to have been killed as he was hunting in Yellville an area roughly 102 miles east of Fayetteville, on Tuesday at about 6:30 p.m., officials said. Alexander shot the buck using a muzzleloader, Keith Stevens, a spokesperson for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, told Fox News. He apparently went over to the buck and it got up and attacked him, Stevens said. The 66-year-old was able to call his wife and he was transported to the hospital after 8 p.m. He was going to be airlifted to the hospital, but Alexander stopped breathing on the way to the helicopter, so he was driven there in an ambulance. Alexander was pronounced dead at Baxter Regional Medical Center in Mountain Home. It wasn't clear whether Alexander died from the deer attack or due to other medical problems like a heart attack, but hospital officials said he did have puncture wounds when he was admitted. The spokesperson said he doesn't believe an autopsy will be conducted to find out how the hunter died. Stevens told KY3 that about 4 years ago there was a similar incident during which somebody was stuck by a buck's antlers but survived. He said hunters should make sure to wait 30 minutes after shooting a deer before approaching it, as it may not be dead. Stevens said Alexander may have done that, but we just don't know. See deer on the road? Resist the urge to swerve. This story is from the MSN.com website and was reported by Tim Harlow. Motorists can hit any animal anytime, anywhere, but the odds of that happening in Minnesota are higher than in most states. And if it's going to happen, now is the time. Collisions with wildlife occur most frequently in the fall, and the risk to drivers will be the greatest over the next few weeks as deer breeding season reaches its peak, said Barb Keller, a big game program leader with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. Deer by far are the animals most commonly hit, but dogs, cats, squirrels, and rats are frequently hit and killed, according to State Farm's most recent analysis of vehicle-animal crash claims data. The insurance company estimated that U.S. drivers hit 1.9 million animals between July 1, 2018 and June 30, 2019. In Minnesota, drivers have a 1 in 64 chance of hitting an animal, making it the 10th most likely place for such a mishap, State Farm said. Farmers Insurance found Minnesota ranked 6th highest in the nation for roadway animal crashes between September and November, with 56% of claims resulting from collisions with animals filed during those 3 months. As frightening as it sounds, hitting a deer may be the best option. A farmer's survey found that more than 2/3 of drivers believe they should swerve to avoid hitting an animal, but that could lead to a much worse outcome. Deer can change direction quickly, and swerving might not prevent a collision. Swerving might also cause a more significant accident with a tree, guardrail, or another vehicle. Drivers should remain alert in areas marked with deer crossing signs, slow down, stay towards the middle of the road, and if there's no oncoming traffic, use high beams to illuminate the road. The amount of damage often depends on a driver's reaction and whether they slow down rather than the size of the animal, said Holly Anderson, a State Farm spokeswoman. Drivers who strike a deer should move to the side of the road, call law enforcement and their insurance company, and maybe think about what to do with the deer. West Virginia hunter takes down 17-point buck after tracking it for 6 years. This story is from the Fox News website and was posted by Michael Holland. Some things are just worth waiting for. After spending 6 years tracking and watching the animal grow, a hunter finally put down a massive buck. His patience paid off as he now gets to say he took down a 17-pointer. David Miller first spotted the animal in 2013, the West Virginia Gazette-Mail reported. Miller and his friends had leased a piece of property in Mingo County, West Virginia, and would notice the impressive animal on a network of game cameras they had set up. Miller said he was able to recognize the buck due to its identifiable antler points. After noticing the animal seemed to be avoiding certain areas, Miller set up a camera where he thought the buck might avoid hunters. After the camera made a rare daytime spotting of the animal, Miller went to work, bringing a bow and arrow with him. Despite coming across several other impressive bucks on his hunt, Miller stayed patient. I caught a movement at one of the scrapes, Miller told the Gazette-Mail. The old buck had slipped in. He lowered his head to go under a branch, and I could see it was him. He stepped out into the open about 18 yards away. When his head went behind a tree, I shot him. Miller shared photos of his triumphant moment on Facebook. 17 scoreable points and 9.5 years old. He rough gross scored at 179 inch and change. Miller said, I'm still reflecting on it all and have not wrapped my head around it yet, but I look forward to sharing this story because it means so much to me, mostly because of the people involved through it all. So much has happened over the years. Truly incredible. Survey says firearms deer hunting leads to less violence. This story is from the Tribe Live website and was reported by Bob Fry. Deer hunters are killers, but not of each other or their neighbors. That's what the research says anyway. Ball State economics professor Paul Niekamp looked at the relationship between violent crimes and deer hunting seasons in 21 states over 20 years. He recently released the results of his work. Deer seasons, Niekamp said, are unique. unparalleled by any policy in existence, in arming people across rural America. Each year, more than 10 million Americans, about 18% of all American gun owners, use firearms to hunt deer during restricted dates. There are no policies that induce 600,000 Wisconsin males or 530,000 Michigan males to systematically and temporarily carry and use firearms, he said. Yet examining crime statistics from the peak hunting days did not show any spikes in violence. In fact, the opposite is true. NICAMP determined that there are roughly 12% fewer violent crimes on the first 2 days of firearm deer season than otherwise in rural areas. At the same time, the study also found that alcohol-related arrests for juvenile males fell by 22% and narcotic offenses fell by 15% at the start of hunting season. That, he said, suggests firearm hunting may have a positive effect on behavior. There may be larger societal reasons for that. Young rural males typically learn about guns differently than do young urban ones, NICAMP said. Historically, hunting has primarily been a tradition passed down from father to son. Young urban males, he added, are more likely to grow up in fatherless homes, which increases risk for participating in gangs or criminal activity. Overall, NICAMP advanced 3 possible reasons for why crime goes down when hunting participation goes up. First, hunting is a time-consuming activity that is inherently incapacitating, which may decrease crime. Second, hunters may face more regulation than other gun owners. And third, rural Americans own different guns for different reasons than the population average. There's also some truth, it seems, to those bumper stickers reading like, "Hunt with your kids, not for them." NICAMP said in rural areas, additional recreational opportunities like hunting may assist in keeping juveniles out of trouble. 1 in a million, 3 antlered deer caught on camera roaming in Michigan wilderness. This story is from the Kansas City Star website and was reported by Chakur Koop. A deer with 3 antlers was spotted roaming in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Experts say it's a 1 in a million thing, according to the Detroit Free Press. Steve Lindbergh, a former state lawmaker who often photographs nature, captured photos of the buck, according to the Facebook post. For all the doubters who think the picture was altered, Lindbergh shared a second image of the deer just to dispel any Photoshop rumors, Lindbergh wrote. Steve Edwards, a large animal veterinarian, looked at the pictures and thinks they're real, according to the Detroit Free Press. Edwards believes the third antler could be the result of an unusual development when the deer was still in the embryo, the Associated Press reported. Lindbergh wants the deer to survive this deer hunting season, WLUC reported. At the end of the day, I'll be honest with you. I'd like to get more pictures of that deer, Lindbergh told WLUC. I'd like to see if it comes back next year, so I'm kind of rooting for it to make it through the deer season. Pennsylvania wildlife officials investigating reprehensible video of teens kicking and abusing a wounded deer. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Janine Puhak. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is investigating a reprehensible video of 2 boys abusing an injured deer in an assault that reportedly occurred on the first day of deer rifle season for hunters in the state. On Saturday, disturbing video footage hit Facebook featuring a young man repeatedly kicking a buck in the face while a friend filmed. The male deer, which appeared to have been shot, laid on the ground and pawed at the attacker while the 2 boys could be heard snickering and taunting the animal. In the days since, the violent video has since gone viral, receiving nearly 6,000 shares on Facebook. The incident reportedly occurred near the borough of Brookville on November 30th, WKBN reports. The following day, representatives from the Game Commission also spoke out on Facebook to confirm that they would be investigating the reprehensible incident. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is aware of a video purporting to show individuals assaulting an injured deer. The conduct portrayed in the video is reprehensible and potentially a violation of the law. Pennsylvania state game wardens are currently investigating the matter. Thank you for your help and for your concern for Pennsylvania wildlife. Anyone with information on the footage is urged to contact the Operation Game Thief Hotline at 1-888-PGC-8001 or the Pennsylvania Game Commission's Northwest Region Dispatch Office at 814-432-3187. Making history. This first-time hunter is 104 years old. This story is from the Guns America website and was reported by Levi Sim. More and more mature adults are taking to the field each year to hunt for their first time in their lives. You'll find 30-year-old hipsters swinging crossbows and 40-year-old account managers raising a rifle on public lands across the country for the first time each fall. One of the fastest-growing demographics of new hunters is rumored to be adult women, and Florence Teeters of Price County, Wisconsin certainly fits into that category. She killed her first deer this year with her son at age 104. Not only did Mrs. Teeters kill her first deer this year, but the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources reports that she also goes ziplining, attends Mardi Gras each year, and tends her garden in her bare feet. She's clearly got the kind of zest for life we all hope to maintain, and taking on new adventures is a great way to keep life interesting. Wisconsin's gun season is just 9 days long, but Florence ended up killing her buck on opening day. She hunted her property in Price County from a blind with her son Bill. The two of them only waited about 2 hours before her whitetail buck arrived. I tapped her on the knee and I pointed, Bill said. Florence waited for her shot and then she took it. She was so excited and saying, I got a buck, Bill said. It turns out that Florence Teeters is the oldest person to purchase a license and kill a deer in the state's recorded history. They could probably add first-time licensee to that as well. There was a lot of news last year about 105-year-old Virginian Clyde Roberts, who was still hunting. He'd been doing it for about 40 years. Both he and Florence Teeters should be encouraging examples to those adults who think they may be a little too old to start hunting. Michigan hunter sprayed brother stand with deer repellent. This story is from the Fox News website, reported by Alexandra Diabler. A Michigan man has admitted to intentionally sabotaging his brother by spraying deer repellent around his hunting stands. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources recently responded to a complaint of hunter harassment during firearm deer season in Newaygo County. The complaint accused the brother of harassing him while hunting on private land the pair owned together. DNR Conservation Officer Mike Wells, who invested the case, examined 2 SD cards from trail cameras, which showed the brother wearing a backpack sprayer and spraying 2 hunting stands located on public U.S. Forest Service property, Michigan Live reports. The DNR collected and tested samples of the liquid sprayed on the stands. According to reports, Officer Wells confronted the suspect as he was hunting in his blind. The man confessed to tampering and harassment. He was also found to have been illegally hunting using bait. The man was reportedly upset because he felt his brother was intentionally cutting off the deer by hunting the public land next to the private camp the pair owned, the Department of Natural Resources shared. The man reportedly apologized and admitted to spraying liquid fence, which is used as a repellent for deer. A warrant request has been submitted by the DNR for hunter harassment and using bait, the outlet reported. Iowa hunting partner shoots house and fellow hunter during opening weekend excursion. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Janine Puhak. Talk about a poor shot. One ill-fated hunting excursion in Iowa ended in property damage and a trip to the hospital after one member of the hunting party was shot in the leg. On Sunday, during the opening weekend of shotgun deer season, conservation officers with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources received word that a Logan home was damaged by bullets. An 18-year-old hunter named Chase McGuire was shooting at a deer over a hilltop when his bullets missed the animal and hit a nearby house, KCAU reported. Worse yet, during the same outing, another member of the hunting party was shot in the leg by one of his fellow outdoorsmen. Craig Brendan, 38, was shot in the leg by another hunter who was firing at a wounded deer, KTVO reports. Brendan, also of Logan, was hospitalized for the injury and later airlifted to the University of Nebraska Medical Center, where he remains in stable condition. Now authorities are working to determine which hunter in the group fired the shot that hit Brendan. An investigation has since been launched into the incident and no charges had been filed as of Tuesday, per KCAU. Deer killed in Georgia after crashing through driver's windshield. He tried to hitch a ride. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Robert Gearty. A female motorist was okay after a head-on encounter with a deer on a Georgia road. It happened on a Thursday morning in Jones County. Not a good way to start the morning, Sheriff Butch Reese said on Facebook. I knew it was cold this morning. I guess the deer was looking for a little heat or maybe trying to get away from a hunter in the woods, but whatever the reason, he tried to hitch a ride. Reese posted a photo showing the dead deer in the vehicle's front seat after crashing through the windshield. The sheriff said the woman behind the wheel was not injured, but she didn't care for a riding partner either. He appealed to hunters to help us out with the deer problem and get them while they are in the woods. WMGTV reported last month from November 1st to November 27th there were 41 accidents between cars and deer in Jones County, far above the usual monthly average of 16.
Really can't thank Jim enough for doing what he does week in and week out with his contributors, Tim Donzie, John Geist, Dan Applebaum, in putting together the news story each and every episode, as he's done for the last 4 or 5 years. It's really been a nice piece to the podcast. Jim will keep putting out the deer news each and every episode. Here's to the Roaring 20s.